At exactly 7 o'clock in the morning, I was already awake, long before the alarm clock decided to buzz. It always happened this way. No matter how late I went to bed, my eyes would open with the same stubborn punctuality. Habit. Age. Probably both. At 78, my days began with a quiet inventory of pain, knees, back, hips, all accounted for. I sat up slowly, letting my body adjust to the morning. My apartment was modest, small by design, and nestled in a quiet neighborhood far from downtown Millville, where Thorndyke Enterprises still stood like a pillar among glass towers. Here, I was just Mrs. Thorndyke, a retired widow with a pension and quiet routines. No one here knew me as Winona Thorndyke, owner and silent matriarch of a business empire. The apartment's charm was subtle, filled with old furniture passed down from my parents and antiques carefully placed, not flashy, but priceless to the trained eye. My late husband Harold always believed true wealth shouldn't be flaunted. I'd lived by that rule, especially after he died, and especially when I made the decision to see who my children had become without the shadow of money. I slipped into my robe and shuffled to the kitchen. The kettle went on, and I retrieved my favorite teacup, a simple porcelain piece that Harold had given me on our 30th anniversary. Handmade by a renowned craftsman, it was worth more than any of my children likely imagined. Not that they'd ever asked. To them, I was just a tired old woman with outdated tastes and tedious habits. My morning ritual was sacred: tea, toast with my homemade jam, quietly ferried from my country house, and my blood pressure tablets. While the water boiled, I stood by the window, watching the first signs of life stir in Millville. This was the town where I had been born, married, raised children, and buried my husband. Everything I cherished had happened here. Once breakfast was done, I changed into what my children mockingly called Grandma's uniform: a well-made gray skirt, a pale blue cotton blouse, a cardigan, and comfortable shoes. I applied just enough makeup to feel human, powder, a bit of lipstick, and tied back my gray hair in a no-nonsense bun. The mirror reflected the woman they expected: invisible, docile, ordinary. That was just fine. At 8:30, the phone rang. It was Michel, my eldest. He rarely called, usually only to share some achievement or deliver a polite demand. "Mom, are you awake?" His voice was clipped, impatient. "Of course I'm awake, Michel," I said warmly. "I get up at 7. How are you? How's Serenity? And the kids?" "I'm fine. Listen, Serenity was supposed to call you." "She didn't." "No, sweetie, not in, let's see, 2 weeks?" I answered, trying to soften the awkward silence that followed. I could almost hear the eye roll. "Whatever. I got a promotion, Mom. Senior partner now." He barely paused. "We're having a family dinner tomorrow at 6:30. The Aurora. You know it." Did I know the Aurora? My lips curved into a private smile. "Yes, honey. Congratulations. That's wonderful news." "Thanks," he replied quickly, rushing to get it over with. "So, Serenity insists you come. Family thing." Serenity insists. A bold-faced lie. That woman despised me. To her, I was a relic of her husband's working-class past, a stain on the polished image she'd crafted. But I played along. "Of course. I'd love to come." A pause. Then the inevitable. "Just, Mom, wear something decent, okay? It's a high-end place. Important people will be there." I glanced down at my uniform and nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I'll try to look nice, Michelle." "Great. See you tomorrow." Click. No goodbye. No warmth. Still, I sighed and smiled faintly. His promotion truly was good news. Michel had always been ambitious. As a boy, he dreamed of defending the innocent, of standing for justice. Now he defended corporations, climbing the ladder in a world herald, and I never wanted for him. But he seemed content. At least on the surface. By 9 o'clock, I stepped out. Mrs. Jenkins, my neighbor, was watering her flowers. Good morning, Winona. Off so early. To work, Edith. Where else? I smiled. Mrs. Jenkins was the only one who knew the truth. We'd been friends for 30 years. Still no calls from the kids? Michelle called. There's a dinner tomorrow. At the Aurora. Mrs. Jenkins snorted. Your restaurant. And they still don't know. Honestly, Winona. And they won't, I said with a smile, walking toward the bus stop. I could have taken a cab or even had a driver, but I preferred the bus. Part of the disguise. Part of the game. Besides, I enjoyed watching people. 30 minutes later, I stepped off in Millville's business district and headed to the unassuming building marked Thorndyke Enterprises. On paper, the company was owned by a trust Harold had set up. In reality, I ran it. After his death, the children assumed I was just receiving a pension and small dividends. They had no idea I controlled the entire operation, including the very restaurant where Michelle would host his big night. Betty, my secretary, greeted me warmly. Good morning, Mrs. Thorndyke. Mr. Flinch is waiting with the quarterly report. In the conference room, Dorian Flinch looked up from a stack of papers. Good morning, Winona. You look grandmotherly today. Shut up, Dorian, I said, laughing. Tell me about the restaurant. Dorian, one of the few people who knew both versions of me, smiled. The restaurant's thriving. Revenues up 12%. New chefs doing great. Critics love him. And that wine supplier? Gone. Replaced with a family-run winery. Great quality, better price. We dove into business. He was thorough, respectful, and honest, qualities I treasured. By noon, I excused myself and changed in the office. Out came the elegant pantsuit, pearl necklace, heels, and subtle but precise makeup. Dorian chuckled as I transformed. Why keep this up, Winona? Why not tell the kids the truth? I paused. When Harold died, they didn't notice my grief. They were too busy dividing assets. Michelle wanted me in a nursing home for my own good. Lovegood thought I couldn't handle the company and wanted control. I decided to test them, see how they'd treat me if they thought I was poor and irrelevant. And they failed, Dorian said softly. They did, I replied. And they still are. But you're hurting. I see it. I'd rather hurt from truth than be comforted by their lies. That afternoon, we arrived at the Aurora for lunch. The restaurant gleamed, a historic building restored with care, every inch reflecting the dream Harold and I once shared. The staff greeted me as always, with deference, not servility. Everyone here knew the real me. Mrs. Thorndyke, the sommelier said, there's a problem in the wine cellar. A mislabeled crate, quickly resolved. I checked in with the chef, approved menu updates, watched the waitstaff flow like dancers across the floor. By 3 o'clock, I was back in the office, changing once again into the plain clothes of the invisible matriarch. Dorian handed me my coat. Big reservation tomorrow. The family dinner too. I know. Michelle's celebration. He hesitated. Are you sure this is wise? I didn't choose the venue. Ironic, isn't it? What will you do? Same as always, I said, heading to the door. Play the invisible old woman. And if someone recognizes you? We'll say it's a service check, I replied. Dorian shook his head slowly. One day this game is going to end badly. I smiled faintly as I stepped out. Maybe, but not tomorrow. Maybe, I had said, but for now, I wonder how long I can keep it going. That evening, back home, the phone rang. I answered, expecting another courtesy call or reminder, but it was Serenity. Her voice, as always, carried the weary tone of someone doing me a favor by speaking to me. "Winona," she began bluntly, "Michelle said he called you this morning. Are you coming over for dinner tomorrow?" "Of course, darling. I already told Michelle," I replied, trying to sound pleasant. "Good." There was a pause, a small breath that warned me something else was coming. "Listen, Winona. This is a very important event for Michelle. His colleagues will be there. People from high society. Do you know what I mean?" "Not really, Serenity. Explain, please." I heard her sigh, loud and unmistakably annoyed. "I mean, you need to look, appropriate. Don't wear those old clothes of yours. And please don't tell your good old days stories. No one's interested." I swallowed hard, pushing back the familiar swell of hurt. No one in my family ever seemed to care about my past, my stories, my life. To them, I was just an old woman, tolerated out of obligation. "I'll try not to embarrass you, Serenity." "Good. Also, Lovegood is coming with the children, too. And please, don't start asking him about his work. You know how he doesn't like to talk about it." Lovegood, my youngest son, had drifted even further away from me after his father died. He'd thrown himself into finance, always working, never calling. When his wife left him 5 years ago and he was left to raise 2 children alone, he grew more distant than ever. "Of course, Serenity. I'll be on my best behavior. See you tomorrow then. 18:30. She hung up before I could respond, just like Michelle had earlier. The apple clearly hadn't fallen far from the tree. I went to bed early, but couldn't sleep for a long time. My mind spun with thoughts of tomorrow night, how my children would look right through me, how they'd talk to me like I was a child or someone who'd lost their mind. My grandchildren would avoid me, embarrassed by poor old grandma. It was painful. Even after all these years, it still hurt. And yet, another feeling lingered beneath the ache, curiosity, even anticipation. How long could this masquerade last? What would happen when the truth came out? How would they react when they realized I had been watching, quietly, all these years? Tomorrow might be the turning point. After all, they were coming to my restaurant, stepping unknowingly into my world. Something told me the charade couldn't last much longer. With that thought, I finally drifted off to sleep. Tomorrow was going to be a busy day. I woke earlier than usual, 6 a.m., my thoughts already swirling around the evening ahead. A family dinner at my own restaurant. Life had a strange sense of humor. I didn't believe in coincidence, but sometimes life handed me moments so ironic, I could only shrug and smile. After a shower and a strong cup of tea, I pulled my carefully preserved work outfit from the closet, a dark blue suit with a knee-length skirt, a crisp white blouse, and pearl earrings. I always kept it ironed and ready, though I usually changed at the office. Today, I wanted to arrive at the restaurant early to make sure everything was perfect. I packed my suit and work bag, slipped on my grandmotherly attire, and left the house by 7:30. As I stepped outside, Mrs. Jenkins was already tending her garden. "Early today, Winona," she said, peering over her glasses. "Big day." "You could say that," I replied, pausing at the gate. "The family is celebrating Michelle's promotion at my restaurant tonight." "Oh my God." Edith straightened up, wincing as she held her back. "What are you going to do?" "I haven't decided yet. Maybe nothing. I'll see what the circumstances are." "Winona Thorndyke," she said, shaking her head, "you're either the wisest or the most reckless woman I know." "Probably both." I grinned. "Wish me luck, Edith." "Good luck to you, dear. And may your children finally see the light." Instead of taking the bus, I hailed a cab. I was short on time and needed to stop at the office first. The driver, a young man with a sculpted beard, looked unimpressed when I gave the address. Thorndyke Enterprises. Probably assumed I was a secretary or cleaning lady. That was fine by me. The office was quiet when I arrived. Most employees didn't trickle in until 9 o'clock. I changed clothes quickly, applied my makeup with care, and pinned my hair in a neat bun. The transformation was remarkable. No one would have guessed that the modest, gray-haired woman they thought they knew was also a confident, sharply dressed businesswoman. Dorian was already waiting in his office. My manager, always impeccably dressed, rose as I entered. "Good morning, Winona. You look worried." "I have my reasons." I sat across from him. "My children and grandchildren are dining at Aurora tonight." "I remember." He leaned forward, folding his hands. "Have you decided how you're going to proceed?" "Not yet. But we need to brief the staff so no one gives me away." "Reasonable," he said, nodding. "I've already made a list of everyone on the evening shift. We'll brief them." "Okay." I exhaled slowly. "What's on the schedule today?" "First, the air conditioning in the small room. Technicians are arriving at 11 o'clock. Second, a meeting with the new seafood supplier at 12 o'clock. Third, we need to finalize preparations for next week's fundraiser." "Not much then," I muttered. "Also," Dorian added, "the city council called. The Historic Buildings Commission wants to inspect Aurora next week. Something about adding it to the historic registry." "Make the arrangements," I said, standing. "Let's head to the restaurant. Fill me in on the rest on the way." We took my company car, a plain black sedan with tinted windows. Thomas, my driver for 8 years, was behind the wheel. He knew about my double life, and he never asked questions. Dorian and I sat in the back, and he opened his clipboard. "The reservation is under Michelle Thorndyke. Table for 8, 1830. He showed me the screen. "I've given them the best table by the window." "Who's serving them?" "Frederick. He's only been with us 6 months. He's never seen you as, well, the old lady." "That's fine, but you'll have to explain everything to him." "Absolutely. I'll give the entire evening crew a briefing at 1600 hours." I nodded, gazing out the window at the city. Millville was changing. The old houses were being replaced with sleek skyscrapers, but the downtown area, where our restaurant stood, had kept its charm. Aurora thrived there, elegant and timeless. "You realize this can't go on forever, don't you?" Dorian asked suddenly. "What's that?" "This double life. Sooner or later, the truth will come out." "Maybe," I said with a shrug. "But for now, I'm fine with the status quo." "Are you punishing them, or yourself?" His voice was quiet, touched with concern. I hesitated. Was I really punishing my children? Or was I protecting myself? From judgment, disappointment, pain? "Probably both," I answered finally. "But tonight will be interesting. Watching them in my restaurant." "Don't you want to shock them? Reveal your secret in some grand way?" "No," I shook my head. "That would be too melodramatic. I just want to observe. See how they behave when they think I'm no one." We arrived at the back entrance of Aurora around 9 a.m. The staff was already busy. Chefs prepped for lunch. Waiters arranged tables. Bartenders checked stock. Dorian and I walked through the kitchen, greeting the staff. Chef Raymond, brilliant, temperamental, and thoroughly French, paused his whirlwind of culinary instructions to approach me. "Madame Thorndyke," he said, "I'd like to discuss tonight's special menu. I have some ideas." "Of course, Raymond," I smiled. "Give me half an hour to take care of a few urgent things, and I'm all yours." He nodded and returned to his brigade, barking orders with gusto. I entered my office, a small but refined room near the kitchen, and went through the morning's mail while Dorian arranged the visit from the air conditioning technicians. An hour later, we made a final inspection of the restaurant. Clean tablecloths, polished glasses, every napkin folded just right. The Thorndyke's table must be spotless, I reminded the head waiter. Of course, ma'am, he said. Mr. Flinch has already given instructions. Your family will be pleased. They don't know it's my restaurant, I said quietly. And so, the masquerade would continue, at least for one more night. And they won't have to find out tonight. It's a sort of test. The waiter raised his eyebrows in surprise but quickly masked his reaction. I understand, ma'am. It will be done. At precisely 11 a.m., the air conditioning technicians arrived. The problem was more serious than expected. The main unit needed replacement. This meant the smaller private hall would be unavailable until at least the following day. Dorian scanned the list of evening reservations, brow furrowed. We'll have to move the bookings from the small room to the main room, he noted. It's not critical, but it will require some rearranging. You take care of it, I nodded firmly. I'm heading to Raymond's to discuss the menu. At precisely 11 a.m., the air conditioning technicians arrived. The problem was more serious than expected. The main unit needed replacement. This meant the smaller private hall would be unavailable until at least the following day. Dorian scanned the list of evening reservations, brow furrowed. We'll have to move the bookings from the small room to the main room, he noted. It's not critical, but it will require some rearranging. You take care of it, I nodded firmly. I'm heading to Raymond's to discuss the menu. In the kitchen, the chef awaited me surrounded by vibrant samples of his new dishes. We spent the next half-hour tasting and discussing each one. Raymond was a culinary artist, brilliant and bold, but sometimes I had to temper his more extravagant impulses. For tonight's menu, he began, passing me a plate of perfectly cooked lamb. I suggest our signature rosemary lamb. And perhaps a new dessert, chocolate fondant with lavender ice cream. I tried the lamb. It was exquisite, melting effortlessly on my tongue, the blend of spices perfectly balanced. The lamb, yes, definitely, I agreed. But go easy on the lavender in the dessert. It's a bold flavor. Not everyone will appreciate it. If you say so, madam, he replied with a slight bow, though I could see the flicker of disagreement in his eyes. Raymond had full faith in his palate. After lunch, I met with Dorian and the new seafood supplier, a cheerful young man offering organic oysters sourced from nearby farms. Then finally, we turned our full attention to preparing for what would be my family's evening visit. When we were alone in my office, Dorian leaned forward slightly. So, how do we proceed? Brief the staff, I said. Especially Frederick. He'll be their server tonight. Make sure everyone understands this is my family, but they don't know about Aurora or my role in it. They don't need to find out tonight. And you? He asked. What role will you play? The usual one, I smiled. Just the grandmother. I'll arrive separately, like I'm simply invited to a family dinner. And if any staff addresses you as the owner? They won't. You and I will see to that. Besides, tonight's team is mostly new. They've only ever seen me in business attire, not as a modest pensioner. Dorian tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the desk. You could use this opportunity to tell them the truth. I could, I admitted. But I'm not sure I'm ready for that. Let's see how tonight goes. He stood. All right. I'll go prepare the staff. What about you? I'll work on the fundraiser menu for next week. Then I'll do one last walk through the restaurant, check every detail. After he left, I sat quietly, gazing out the window at the bustling street below. My thoughts circled the evening ahead. What exactly was I trying to prove with this elaborate charade? Was it petty revenge for the years of neglect? For how my children had split Harold's inheritance without even asking my opinion? Maybe a little. But there was more. I wanted to see, truly see, if they still loved me, or merely clung to a version of me that suited them. The ever-supportive mother, quiet in the background, never demanding, never defiant. Just Mom. When Harold died, something inside me cracked. Not just from grief, but from how quickly my children rushed to take over my life. As if, without him, I was suddenly incapable. Lovig had offered to help with the company. It's too complicated for you, Mom. Michelle wanted to sell the house. You need something smaller, Mom. You're alone now. Not one of them had asked what I wanted. So I made a decision. I sold the family home, but didn't buy a little apartment like they expected. Instead, I purchased a penthouse downtown. Then, I bought a modest flat on the outskirts to serve as my alternate life. Officially, I handed over management of the company to a trust. In reality, I took full control. And I watched, silently, as my children gradually stopped treating me like a person. In their eyes, I became a burden. An old woman clinging to outdated views. The sound of the office door opening snapped me from my thoughts. Dorian returned. All ready, he announced. I've spoken to the staff. Everyone has been briefed. Your secret's safe. Good, I said, rising. I'll head home to get ready. You sure you don't want to change here, like usual? No, I shook my head. Too risky. One of the kids might arrive early and see me. Fair point, Dorian nodded. I'll see you tonight. I'll be there the whole time, to make sure everything runs smoothly. Thank you, I said, genuinely. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd be just fine, he replied, serious now. You're stronger than you think, Winona. Back home, I slipped into my granny outfit and hailed a cab. On the ride, I thought about what to wear that night. Serenity had insisted I look presentable. But what did that mean? I had a few elegant dresses my children had never seen me in. Perhaps it was time. First, I checked the mail. Bills. Flyers. And a postcard from Emily, Michelle's daughter. Dear Grandma, thanks for the birthday gift. Mom said I should write, but I could have just called. Kisses, Emily. No mention of whether she liked the gift, an antique brooch from my own grandmother. I imagine she tossed it into some forgotten drawer, dismissing it as old-fashioned. I took a long shower, letting the steam ease my nerves as I ran through the evening in my mind. No matter what happened, I promised myself I would remain calm, dignified. Even if my children behaved thoughtlessly, I would not stoop. I was still their mother, and though they didn't know it, the owner of the very restaurant in which they'd be dining. I chose a dark blue dress, simple, elegant, with a classic cut. Around my neck, I fastened the pearl necklace Harold had given me so long ago. My shoes had a low heel, fashionable enough, yet comfortable. I applied my makeup carefully, subtly, and gathered my hair into a clean, understated style. When I looked in the mirror, I saw not a tired widow or neglected senior, but a woman of quiet strength and enduring grace. Not a wealthy mogul, but not the helpless old woman my children seemed to believe I was. At 4 p.m., Dorian called. Everything is set. Staff is briefed. The table is perfect. Frederick understands his role and promises to be attentive. Thank you, Dorian, I said. I'll arrive by 6:30. You should come earlier, he advised. Michelle reserved for 6:30, but they might arrive early. Good point. I'll be there by 6. I glanced in the mirror one last time. Tonight might change everything. Perhaps it was time to stop hiding, to let them see the real me. Or maybe just observe how blind they had become. Either way, I was ready. And Aurora, our restaurant, was ready too. I arrived at Aurora 20 minutes before the scheduled dinner. The cab pulled up in front of the grand entrance. Marble steps, elegant columns, engraved glass doors. My vision. My pride. My secret. I paused to take it in before paying the driver and stepping out. The doorman, new and young, hurried to open the door. He didn't recognize me, which was exactly how I wanted it. Inside, the restaurant shimmered under soft lighting and the sparkle of crystal chandeliers. Snow-white tablecloths adorned every table, offset by polished dark wood, fragrant fresh flowers, and gleaming silverware. The hostess greeted me at the door. "Good evening, ma'am. Do you have a reservation?" "I'm here to join the Thorndyke family," I said calmly. "Not sure if they've arrived yet." She scanned the clipboard. "Yes, table for 6:30. They're not here yet. Let me show you." As we crossed the dining room, I spotted Dorian at the bar speaking with the bartender. He caught my eye and gave a subtle nod. All was under control. The table was perfect, one of the best spots in the restaurant, beside a wide window overlooking the park. Tucked into a cozy alcove, it allowed privacy without isolation, giving me full view of the dining room. "Would you like anything while you wait?" the hostess asked. "A glass of Chardonnay, please." Moments later, Frederick appeared, tall and confident, posture impeccable. He placed the glass before me. "Good evening, ma'am. Chardonnay." And with that, the stage was set. "Anything else?" "Not yet, thank you," I replied, taking a small sip of my wine. It was excellent, as always. I had personally selected it from the wine merchant a month earlier, knowing this evening would require something exceptional. Gradually, the restaurant began to fill. It was a Friday night, and every table had been reserved. The crowd was a lively blend of businesspeople celebrating the end of the week, couples on romantic dates, and families gathered for special occasions. Aurora was that kind of place, sophisticated but never stiff, elegant without being pretentious. At exactly 6:30 p.m., I saw my family arrive. Leading the group were Michelle and Serenity, both impeccably dressed. He wore an expensive suit, tailored perfectly, while she floated in wearing an evening dress and far too much jewelry for the occasion. Behind them walked their teenage children, 17-year-old Emily and 14-year-old Jason, each wearing matching expressions of bored superiority, as if being here were a task to endure rather than a moment to enjoy. Trailing them was Lovegood, my youngest son, looking thinner and more tense than usual. He had brought his twins, 12-year-olds Oliver and Amanda, who looked curious and slightly overwhelmed by the grandeur. The hostess escorted them to their table. Michelle spotted me first and offered a bright, practiced smile. "Mom, you're already here, punctual as always." I stood to greet them. "Good evening. It's so good to see you all." Serenity gave me a quick once-over, her eyes lingering on my dress, my necklace, even my hair. She had clearly expected me to show up in my grandmother uniform, and was mildly surprised to find me looking rather well put together. "Winona," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. "You look decent." "Thank you, darling," I replied with a warm smile. "So do you." Emily and Jason offered half-hearted greetings, visibly embarrassed by my presence. But Oliver and Amanda ran up to me, arms open and hearts full. "Grandma!" Amanda exclaimed, hugging me. "Do you have a new dress?" "Yes, honey," I said, patting her head. "It's special for tonight." "It's beautiful," Oliver added with sincerity. "And you look pretty too." Lovegood scowled slightly. "Children, be quiet. We're in a decent place." We took our seats. I found myself between Amanda and Jason, directly across from Serenity. Moments later, our waiter approached. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," the man announced. "My name is Frederick, and I'll be your server tonight. What can I get you?" Michelle ordered a bottle of expensive wine. Serenity, always the health-conscious one, went with mineral water. The children each chose colorful, non-alcoholic cocktails. Lovegood requested a whiskey. Frederick turned to me. "And you, ma'am?" I already have wine, thank you, I said, raising my glass. Serenity gave me a look of thinly veiled judgment. Winona, have you already started without us? I came a little early, I said calmly. Decided to have a glass while I waited. It's good wine. Humph. She clearly disapproved. I hope you're not going to drink too much tonight. Remember what happened at Christmas? Nothing much happened at Christmas, I said lightly. I had 2 glasses of wine and told a few stories about Michelle's youth. Embarrassed him a little in front of his colleagues, perhaps. But I didn't consider that a scandal. In your eyes, she said sharply. Don't worry, darling, I said with a smile, taking another sip. I'll behave myself. Frederick returned with the drinks and handed out the menus. I noticed a few new dishes Raymond, the chef, had added, ones I had personally approved the night before. The chef recommends the lamb with rosemary tonight, Frederick noted. It's a new dish on our menu, absolutely delicious. Oh, I love lamb, Serenity chimed in. It sounds wonderful. Michelle studied the wine list. It's an impressive selection. I think a good red would go well with the lamb. Any recommendations? Frederick professionally listed a few high-end choices. Naturally, Michelle selected one of the most expensive bottles. That was his way. Status, always status. So now we can celebrate, Michelle declared once the waiter left. As you all know, I've been promoted. I'm now a senior partner at the firm. Congratulations, darling, I said sincerely. I'm very proud of you. Thank you, Mom. He nodded, basking in his moment. It's a big step. I'll be working with our most important clients now. And, of course, my salary is going up significantly. We're thinking of buying a new house, Serenity added. In Riverside Gardens. Do you know the place, Winona? Riverside Gardens. Of course I knew it. One of the city's most prestigious neighborhoods, where homes started in the millions. In fact, I own several properties there through Thorndyke Enterprises. But I answered simply, yes, I've heard of it. It's a beautiful area, Serenity went on. Very exclusive. Only successful people live there. And rich, Jason added, unfiltered as ever. Jason, his mother snapped. Don't talk about money at the table. But you were just talking about the new house, the boy said plainly. Serenity gave him a sharp look, then shifted the conversation. Anyway, Emily has received provisional admission to Princeton. Congratulations, dear, I said to my granddaughter. That's wonderful. Emily blushed slightly. It's not final yet, Grandma. Half my class applied to the Ivy League. But not everyone gets in, Serenity interjected quickly. Only the very best. How's your brooch, grandmother? Emily asked suddenly. The one you gave me. Mom said it was antique. Yes, it's a family heirloom, I said, touched that she remembered. It was my grandmother's. It's very interesting, Emily said, trying to be polite. Not really my style, though. Emily prefers modern jewelry, Serenity added. You know why, Nona? Young people don't wear such old-fashioned things anymore. I understand, I said with a nod. Fashions change. But some things have value regardless of trends. Material value, perhaps, Serenity laughed lightly. But not aesthetic value. Frederick arrived with the appetizers, cutting the conversation short. I had ordered the beet carpaccio with goat cheese, a dish I adored. Serenity glanced at my plate disapprovingly. Winona, are you sure you should be eating cheese with your cholesterol? My cholesterol is fine, dear, I replied calmly. My last test came back excellent. Humph. She didn't like that answer either. Well, I'd still be careful if I were you. Health is so fragile at your age. Love it good, quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. Mama, are you taking all the medicine Dr. Stevens prescribed? Of course, honey, I said, slicing into my beet. I'm watching my health. Good. He nodded. Because, I can't take care of you if something happens. I've got too much work, and the kids are already hard enough with Veronica gone. Veronica, his ex-wife, had left 5 years ago. Since then, he'd used her absence as a catch-all excuse for everything from his stress to his emotional distance. I understand, sweetheart, I said gently. Don't worry. I'm doing fine on my own. You might want to think about a nursing home, Michelle interjected suddenly. There's a new place in the suburbs, very decent, with professional care. You'd be with people your own age. I looked at him, startled. We hadn't even gotten to the main course, and already they were trying to put me in a home. Thank you for your concern, Michelle, I said with care. But I prefer to live on my own. I like my apartment and my neighborhood. But you're all alone there, he insisted. What if you fall or get sick at night? I have a phone, I said lightly. And my neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, checks on me often. Mrs. Jenkins? Serenity scoffed. She's older than you. Only 3 years older, I replied, and very active for her age. Still, Michelle persisted, it's not a solution. In a nursing home, you'd have professionals looking after you. And we could visit on a schedule, Serenity added with mock warmth. Once a month, for example. Very convenient. I took another sip of wine to hide the bitterness rising in my chest. Once a month. Like a dentist appointment. Let's discuss this another time, I said, managing a smile. Today, we're celebrating Michelle's promotion. Yes, of course, he agreed, clearly pleased to return to the subject of himself. At that moment, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit approached our table. Michelle Thorndyke. Michelle turned around, instantly brightening. Robert! What an unexpected surprise. They shook hands warmly, and Michelle made the introductions. Everyone, this is Robert Greenwood, my new colleague. Robert, this is my family. He went down the line. Serenity, the children, Lovig Good. When he reached me, he hesitated slightly. And this is my mother, Winona. Robert nodded politely, then turned right back to Michelle to discuss clients and upcoming deals. Meanwhile, Serenity noticed a woman across the room and waved to her enthusiastically. The woman, a glamorous blonde in her 40s, approached our table quickly. Serenity, darling, what a surprise. They embraced with dramatic warmth. Serenity introduced her as Victoria Chase, chairwoman of the charity she belonged to. Victoria was loud and chatty, effortlessly inserting herself into our gathering as though she'd always been part of it. Within minutes, our intimate dinner had become a social circus, our table transformed into a public stage. Robert and Victoria were soon joined by a few more of Michelle's acquaintances. Together, they formed a loud, animated cluster near the table, laughing and talking over one another. Serenity beamed with delight, clearly enjoying the attention and basking in the center of it all. Lovig Good stood among them, clearly participating out of obligation, glancing at his watch every so often, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. The children, now visibly restless, had been left to entertain themselves and were beginning to drift into boredom. I sat quietly at the table, sipping my wine, an unnoticed observer to the unfolding scene. None of the new arrivals made any effort to acknowledge me, let alone include me in their conversation. Michelle and Serenity appeared utterly oblivious to my presence, wrapped up in their vibrant little world. Frederick, our ever-polite waiter, approached the group. "Excuse me, may I suggest dessert?" he asked with his usual grace. Michelle dismissed him with a wave of her hand. "Not at the moment. We're having a conversation." Her tone was brisk, final. Then, finally, someone noticed me. Victoria Chase, her smile pleasant but clearly polite, turned in my direction. "And you must be Serenity's mom?" she asked. "No, I'm Michelle's mother," I replied evenly, keeping my voice calm. Her smile faltered. "Oh," she murmured, visibly embarrassed. "I'm sorry. Nice to meet you." Serenity jumped in quickly, sensing the moment needed redirecting. "Victoria is the head of the Bright Futures Charity Committee. We raise funds for disadvantaged children." "That's very commendable," I said. "Yes, we do important work," Victoria added, finding her confidence again. "We held a gala last month and raised almost $1 million. "I heard about that," I said. "I believe it was at the Continental Hotel?" "That's right." Victoria looked at me with mild surprise. "Were you there?" Before I could answer, Serenity let out a small laugh. "Oh no, Victoria. My mother-in-law doesn't go to those events. The tickets cost $1,000. "I donated to your foundation," I said with a smile. "Anonymously." "You did." Serenity looked stunned. "How much?" "It was anonymous, dear," I reminded her gently. "The point is, no one knows how much or from whom." Victoria looked puzzled, perhaps a bit thrown off, but she quickly turned the conversation back to Serenity, clearly more comfortable in that orbit. As the discussion resumed, I noticed Amanda tugging gently on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, I need to go to the bathroom," she whispered. Lovegood frowned. "This isn't the time, Amanda. Just wait a little while." "But I really need to," she insisted. "I can take her," I offered. Lovegood exhaled with relief and nodded. Amanda and I left the table quietly, unnoticed by the adults, who remained fully absorbed in their laughter and chatter. The restroom was elegant. Marble counters, fresh flowers, polished mirrors. After Amanda stepped out of the stall, she lingered at the mirror, studying her reflection. "Grandma, have you really been here before?" she asked, her tone filled with wonder. "Yes, honey," I said softly, smiling at her reflection. "Many times." "I like it here," she said, running her hand along the marble countertop. "It's beautiful, and the food is good." "I'm glad you like it." I gently stroked her hair. "You've grown so much since I last saw you." "Dad says we can't visit you often because you live far away and he has a lot of work," Amanda said candidly. "Is that true?" "Not really, honey," I replied with a sigh. "I don't live that far, but your daddy does have a lot of work." I paused, then added, "And he says I'm not feeling well and need to rest?" She nodded. "That's not quite true either." I smiled. "I feel fine for my age." We made our way back to the table, but the scene had shifted. The group around Michelle and Serenity had grown larger, at least 10 now, talking even louder than before. Our seats had been taken. I stopped a few feet away, still holding Amanda's hand. Lovegood noticed us and walked over. "Amanda, go to Oliver," he said. "He's over there with Jason and Emily." Amanda looked back at me reluctantly before walking off. The children were seated at the far end of the table, hunched over their phones, clearly bored. "It's getting too noisy in here," Lovegood muttered, turning to me. "Maybe you should go home, Mom. You look tired." "I'm fine," I said quietly. "Besides, there was no dessert yet." "Dessert?" He shook his head. "I don't think we'll be ordering it. This meeting with Michelle's co-workers might take a while." Just then, Serenity approached. She staggered slightly. Clearly, she'd had more to drink than usual. "Oh, there you are," she said, grabbing Lovegood's arm. "Robert invited everyone to the Skyline Bar after dinner. There's a famous jazz band playing tonight." "Everyone?" Lovegood asked, casting a glance in my direction. "Well, all the adults," Serenity giggled. "We'll leave the kids with the nanny." I already called her.
She'll be here in half an hour.
What about Mom? He asked quietly. Serenity turned to look at me, her eyes widening slightly as if she'd forgotten I was still there. Oh, Winona. I don't think you'll like the bar. It'll be noisy, lots of people, more for, modern folks. I understand, I nodded. Don't worry about me. I'll call a cab.
Oh, good.
Serenity looked visibly relieved.
I knew you'd understand.
Michel finally turned his attention to us. What's going on? He asked. Your mom is going home, Serenity explained. We're going to Skyline after dinner. Oh yeah, he said, nodding. That's the right thing. You wouldn't like it there, Mom. Too noisy for you. I wasn't asking for it, I replied calmly.
Of course not.
He patted my shoulder with patronizing familiarity. You've never been much of a party girl.
Not even when you were young, as far as I can remember.
I wondered just how much he could remember. When Michelle was a child, Harold and I used to throw parties often. But childhood memory is selective, I supposed. I'll call you a cab, Lovegood offered, already pulling out his phone.
No need. I stopped him.
I can manage on my own.
Whatever you say, he muttered and turned away, instantly rejoining the boisterous group.
I stepped aside, unsure of my next move. A part of me wanted to walk away from all of it. Another part itched to stay, to make a point, to remind them I was still there, still relevant. But the wiser part of me, the part that had weathered years of slights and disappointment, knew it was time to leave. Tomorrow would bring clarity. I reached for my phone, just about to dial for a cab, when I spotted Dorian striding through the hall with urgency etched across his face.
He wasn't alone. Frederick followed behind him, along with another young man in a waiter's uniform whom I didn't recognize.
Dorian saw me and came straight toward me. The concern in his eyes was unmistakable. Is there a problem? I asked softly.
A small one, he whispered.
One of the guests in the main room claims he was served spoiled fish.
He's scandalized and demanding to see the owner.
Raymond can't handle it? I asked, already suspecting the answer. Raymond is furious and ready to toss the customer out into the street. I had to pull them apart. I'm afraid I can't do without you. I sighed. Of course. All right. I'll be right there. Let me just get my bag. My purse was still on the chair back at the table. I approached quietly, hoping to avoid attention, but Michel spotted me. Mom, are you still here? He asked, sounding irritated. I was just leaving, honey. Just grabbing my bag. I thought you'd called a cab by now. I was about to. I smiled serenely. But it looks like I'm in for a little adventure. An adventure? He smirked. At your age. Age is no barrier to adventure, Michelle. I turned to Dorian, who stood waiting just a few feet away.
Well then, take me to our disgruntled guest.
Dorian nodded, and I followed him toward the main hall, fully aware that my son's stunned gaze was trailing behind me. The main hall was abuzz with the hum of conversation, clinking silverware, and the occasional burst of laughter. Most guests were contentedly enjoying their meals, but a commotion in the far corner quickly drew my attention. A red-faced man stood with arms flailing, his voice loud and irate. "This is outrageous," he bellowed. "I pay mad money for dinner, and they serve me rotten fish." Raymond stood nearby, held back by two waiters. His face was flushed with fury, his thick French accent rising with indignation. "My fish cannot be rotten," he roared. "I personally check every product. You understand nothing about haute cuisine."
Haute cuisine, the man laughed bitterly.
"I've eaten in the finest restaurants across the globe, and never have I been served such revolting food." I stepped forward calmly, my voice steady. Good evening, I said gently. What's the problem? I asked, stepping closer. The man turned toward me, irritated.
And who are you?
My name is Winona Thorndyke, I replied calmly. What can I do for you?
I need the owner of the restaurant, not some. He paused, clearly hesitating to insult an older woman in public. I am the owner of the restaurant, I said, my voice steady and composed.
There was a beat of silence. He stared at me, disbelieving. Raymond, who had been struggling against the waiter's grasp, stopped mid-motion. Dorian stood nearby, watching carefully in case he needed to intervene. You? The man finally blurted. Are you the owner of the Aurora? That's right, I said with a gentle smile. Now, please, tell me what was wrong. The man blinked, visibly thrown off but trying to regain his composure. I was served spoiled fish, he said, less confident now.
It had a strange smell and taste.
It's a special marinade, Raymond shouted indignantly. It's a specialty recipe. Raymond, please, I said, raising my hand to stop him. Let me take a look at the dish. The waiter handed me the half-eaten plate. I examined the fish carefully, then brought it close and sniffed it with practiced delicacy. You're right, I finally said to the man. It does smell unusual, but it's not spoiled. It's a special cooking method using a fermented sauce. The flavor is quite distinctive. Not everyone likes it. We should have warned you when you ordered. The man's brows furrowed. Are you sure it's not spoiled? Absolutely, I nodded. But if the taste doesn't suit you, we'll be happy to replace it with anything else on the menu. On the house, of course. He hesitated, glancing between me and the staff.
Well, if you say so.
I insist, I said warmly.
Turning to the waiter, I added, please bring the gentleman a menu and a glass of our finest wine to apologize for the misunderstanding.
The waiter nodded and went to carry out the request. Raymond still looked upset, but didn't say another word. Thank you for your understanding, I told the man. We value our guests and always strive to make their experience here a positive one. Yes, well, he adjusted his tie, clearly embarrassed. I apologize for the noise. I'm just not used to such exotic tastes. That's all right, I replied with a small smile. I hope you enjoy the next course better. Just as I turned to leave, I heard a voice I hadn't expected to hear tonight.
Mom!
I turned around and saw Michel standing a few feet away, his face frozen in disbelief.
Serenity was beside him, her mouth slightly open. A little farther back stood Lovegood, his brow deeply furrowed, clearly trying to make sense of what he had just witnessed.
Hello, Michel, I said, keeping my tone calm. Is something wrong? Yeah, he stammered.
This man called you the owner of the restaurant.
Yes, that's right, I nodded. He gave a nervous chuckle. But that's impossible. You can't be the owner of Aurora. It's one of the most expensive restaurants in town.
And yet, I said with a shrug.
Serenity stepped closer, narrowing her eyes. What kind of joke is this, Winona? She asked sharply. Are you trying to make fools of us?
Not at all, I replied.
I was just solving a little problem with a client. Mrs. Thorndyke does own the restaurant, Dorian interjected, stepping forward. Allow me to introduce myself. Dorian Finch, the manager. I've worked for your mother for 10 years. Michel glanced back and forth between us, stunned. But how? When? Why didn't you say anything? Did you ask? I met his eyes steadily. Lovegood finally approached. He looked between Michel and Serenity before settling on me with a look of sheer disbelief. This has to be a mistake, he said. Or a prank. Mom can't own a restaurant. She doesn't have that kind of money. And how would you know what kind of money I have, loving good? I asked evenly. Have you ever shown an interest in my finances? Or did you simply assume I was a poor widow living on a pension? He turned to Michelle, baffled. Dad didn't leave you that much money.
We know what was in the will.
You only know what was in his personal will, I said. But Thorndyke Enterprises belongs to me. It always has. Your father and I were equal partners. Michelle's face turned pale. Thorndyke Enterprises? You mean the company that owns half the real estate downtown? That's right, I confirmed, including this building. Serenity made a strangled sound, half sob and half laugh. It can't be, she whispered. You've been pretending to be a poor old woman all this time. Why? I never said I was poor, I answered. You all simply assumed. I just didn't correct your assumptions. But why? Michelle pressed. Why would you keep that from us? I let out a quiet sigh. When your father died, you were both so busy dividing up the inheritance that you didn't notice how much I was grieving.
You, Michelle, told me to sell the house and move into a nursing home for my own good.
And you, loving good, wanted to take over the company, convinced I couldn't handle it. None of them could meet my eyes. I decided to see how you would treat me if you thought I was poor and dependent, I went on. And I learned a great deal about my children. That's not fair, loving good mumbled. You lied to us. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you my business. The same way you didn't tell me about yours. I paused before continuing. When was the last time you asked about my life? My interests? My thoughts? You invited me to visit out of duty, tolerated my presence, and then said goodbye with relief. That's not true, Michelle said, shaking his head. We cared about you. Did you? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Then why did you just try to send me home because you thought I didn't fit in? Why did you never bother to ask what I cared about? You always spoke to me like I was a confused child, or worse, a burden. Michelle started to respond, but Serenity cut in. All right, she said tightly. You're rich. You own a restaurant. What now? What do you want? I don't want anything, Serenity, I said evenly. I'm just doing my job. Solving a problem in my restaurant. You can continue your evening. Weren't you going to Skyline after dinner? Are you kidding me? She snapped. After a revelation like this, you expect us to just go on with our night? What's changed? I shrugged. I'm still Winona Thorndyke, your mother and mother-in-law. The only difference is, now you know I'm not a poor old woman to be sent home in a cab. At that moment, Frederick approached. Sorry to interrupt, Mrs. Thorndyke, he said gently. The customer at table 5 is asking for the bill. Thank you, Frederick, I nodded. Dorian will take care of it. As Dorian stepped away, the four of us remained standing in the middle of the restaurant, acutely aware of the curious stares from nearby tables. Shall we continue this in my office? I suggested. There are too many eyes and ears here. Michelle nodded silently. Serenity, her jaw tight, gave a small nod. Loving Good looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I led them through a discreet hallway to the staff quarters. My office was modest, but elegantly furnished. A dark wood desk, leather chairs, original paintings on the walls. On the table sat a photograph of Harold and me on the opening day of Aurora, 25 years ago. I gestured for them to sit. They did so, still stunned. So, I began, folding my hands. Now you know the truth, or at least part of it. After your father died, I took control of Thorndyke Enterprises. Harold and I were always equal partners. He was the public face. I preferred to remain behind the scenes. But why didn't you tell us? Michelle asked. We're your children.
We had a right to know. A right.
I lifted a brow. To what, exactly?
My money.
No, of course not, he said quickly. But we could have helped.
Given advice.
I didn't need help, Michelle, I said with a faint smile. I was fine. I still am fine.
But the game.
Serenity looked hurt. Was it all just to teach us a lesson? Not a lesson. Just insight, I replied. When you thought I was weak and helpless, you treated me with pity and condescension.
That told me a great deal about how you see me.
And what did you learn? Lovegood asked quietly. That I stopped being a person to you, I answered. I became a duty, a holiday guest. You didn't ask who I was, what I thought about, what I loved. They didn't respond. I softened my tone. I don't blame you. That's the way of the world. Older people become invisible. They're managed or taken care of, but rarely seen. Forgive us, Mom, Michelle said at last.
I didn't realize.
I know, sweetheart, I said gently. I'm not angry. I just wanted you to remember. I'm still here. I'm still me. Winona Thorndyke. A woman who runs a business, loves life, and yes, owns a restaurant.
So what now?
Serenity asked quietly. What's going to change?
That's up to you, I said, meeting their eyes.
All I ask for is a little respect. Some attention. Genuine interest. If you can give me that, I'll be happy. They exchanged uncertain looks. What about the children? Lovegood asked.
Should they know?
You can tell them if you like, I shrugged. But I don't think it matters. To them, I'm just their grandmother. And that's exactly who I want to be. Michelle looked at me, incredulous. You're really not mad at us? A little angry, I admitted. Especially when you tried to kick me out of the restaurant. But mostly, no. I'm not mad. I just want a fresh start.
A real family.
Lovegood suddenly chuckled. You know, Mother, he said, shaking his head, you've always been the most unpredictable of us. Even when I was a kid, I never knew what you'd do next. I smiled. I'll take that as a compliment. It is a compliment, he said softly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I've been so aloof. And for the first time in a long while, there was a quiet that didn't feel heavy, but hopeful. After Veronica left, I closed myself off from everyone. I just shut down emotionally. I understand, sweetheart, I said gently, reaching out and placing my hand over his. But maybe you should open up to your mother, at least. He squeezed my hand and nodded, saying nothing, but the gesture was enough. Michelle looked thoughtful. Mom, I have to ask, how many things are you hiding from us? Is there still something we don't know about? I laughed, shaking my head. Oh, Michelle, every person is a universe of secrets. But if you're asking about material things, no, there are no more secret businesses or hidden treasures. Just Thorndyke Enterprises, Aurora, and a few other investments. A few other investments? Serenity repeated, her expression still stunned. You speak of it so mundanely, she added. Because it is mundane to me, dear, I replied with a small smile. Just like your charity committees are to you. The week after that unforgettable evening at Aurora was filled with silence and reflection for all of us. Neither Michelle nor Lovegood called me. I figured they needed time to process what had happened, and I didn't rush them. I simply went about my usual business, overseeing company operations, checking in at the restaurant, meeting with my business associates. Then, on Thursday, I received a call from Serenity. It was the first time in all the years we'd known each other that she had ever initiated contact. Winona. Her voice was cautious, hesitant. It's Serenity.
Hello, darling, I replied, trying to sound calm despite my surprise.
How are you? We're well, yeah. She paused. Winona, we'd like to invite you to lunch this Sunday.
If you're not busy, of course.
Lunch. I smiled into the phone. I'd love to.
At your place.
Yes. Another pause. Michelle really wants to talk to you. And so do the kids. Emily's been bombarding us with questions about you all week.
I can imagine, I laughed.
What did you tell them? The truth, she said simply. That you own a business and a restaurant, and that we didn't know about it before. I see.
What time is lunch?
12 o'clock. But you can come earlier if you want. Thank you, Serenity. I'll be there at 12. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long while, staring out at the bustling street below. There was something different in Serenity's tone. The usual condescension and underlying superiority were absent. Perhaps that night at Aurora had truly changed their perspective, forced them to reconsider their attitude toward me. Or maybe they were simply digesting the fact that their poor mother was actually a very wealthy and accomplished woman. On Friday, Lovegood called. Unlike his sister-in-law, he didn't mince words. Mom, I acted like an idiot, he admitted without hesitation.
I'm sorry.
It's okay, Lovegood, I replied softly.
You didn't know.
It's not just about the business, he said. It's about the way I've treated you over the years. Like you didn't matter anymore. I swallowed the sudden lump in my throat. Lovegood had always been the more emotionally reserved of my sons, rarely offering vulnerability. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. It means a lot to me. I want the kids to get to know you better, he continued. The real you. Not just Grandma, but Winona Thorndyke, the woman who built an empire. Don't exaggerate, I chuckled. It's not an empire, just a good, stable business.
Whatever, he said with a smile in his voice.
I'm proud of you, Mom, and I wish I'd told you that a long time ago. That conversation lightened something in my spirit. Maybe, just maybe, we could start over, this time on an honest and open foundation. At exactly 12 o'clock on Sunday, I arrived at Michelle and Serenity's home, a grand mansion in a well-to-do neighborhood. I came in my company car, with a driver, determined not to hide my status anymore. I wore a simple but elegant suit from a well-known designer, paired with the pearl necklace and earrings Harold had given me for our 40th anniversary. Michelle opened the door. He looked a little tense but genuinely pleased. Mom, he said, giving me a hug, a rare gesture in recent years. I'm glad you came. Thanks for the invitation, I smiled as I stepped inside. The rest of the family was waiting in the living room. Serenity, unusually modest in a simple yet tasteful dress, Emily and Jason, both suddenly fascinated with their grandmother, and to my surprise, Lovegood and the twins. I hadn't expected to see everyone together. Grandma. Amanda was the first to run to me. Is it true you own the restaurant? Yes, sweetheart, I said, hugging her. And not just the restaurant.
Tell me.
Oliver demanded, rushing up. Dad said you have a whole company. I looked at Lovegood, who gave a shrug and a small smile. The kids have a right to know what an amazing grandmother they have, he said. We moved to the dining room where lunch was served. It wasn't as lavish as the Aurora dinner, but it was a good effort. Serenity had clearly tried to impress, even preparing a few homemade dishes. She'd never been much of a cook, so I appreciated the gesture. At first, the conversation was stilted, too careful, everyone tiptoeing around one another. But slowly, thanks to the curiosity and energy of the children, the mood began to ease. Grandma, how did you become a restaurant owner? Emily asked as she picked at her salad. Your grandfather and I always dreamed of opening one, I explained. Harold loved good food, and I loved creating cozy, inviting spaces. Once our real estate business started bringing in steady income, we decided to make that dream come true. Why didn't you ever tell us? Jason asked, genuinely interested. I paused for a moment, choosing my words carefully. At first, it was just a part of my life that no one asked about. Then, after your grandfather passed away, it became an experiment, an experience. I wanted to see how people would treat an older woman who was seen primarily as a grandmother, not a businesswoman. And how were you treated? Michelle asked softly. In different ways, I said, locking eyes with him. But often condescendingly, as if age had stripped me of my right to have ambitions, ideas, or even a personality. The room fell silent. Even the children seemed to sense the weight of my words. I'm sorry, Mom, Michelle said finally. I didn't realize I was doing that. I know, honey. I gave him a warm smile. Most people don't realize. It's just the way society tends to view the elderly. But things will be different now, Serenity said, her voice surprisingly firm. We'll treat you with the respect you deserve. I looked at her, genuinely taken aback. Of everyone in the family, Serenity had been the most resistant, the most dismissive. Thank you, darling, I said sincerely. That means a lot to me. Can we come and visit you? Amanda asked eagerly. To your real house, not that little apartment? Of course, honey, I chuckled. I have a penthouse downtown. I think you'll love the view from the terrace. Penthouse. Oliver's eyes widened. Cool. I also have a country house, I added, with a pool and a garden. Maybe this summer, you could all come for the weekend. With a pool. Jason perked up. Can we invite some friends? Jason. Serenity snapped. Don't be so forward. It's okay, I laughed. It's a big house, plenty of room for everyone. And yes, Jason, you can invite your friends, if your parents don't mind. As the laughter returned to the table and the conversation began to flow more naturally, I realized something. A new chapter was beginning for our family. And this time, it would be built on truth, understanding, and mutual respect. Lunch continued, and slowly the stiffness at the table gave way to a more natural flow of conversation. The children, full of curiosity and excitement, peppered me with questions about my businesses, the restaurant, and even about my youth. I answered them honestly, withholding nothing. There was no longer any need for secrecy. Michelle and Lovegood listened more than they spoke, still visibly processing the reality that the woman they had taken for granted all these years had built an entire life they never knew about, one of ambition, independence, and quiet success. After the meal, once the children had rushed out to play in the garden and Serenity busied herself in the kitchen making coffee, I remained in the living room with my sons. The mood shifted. Michelle cleared his throat and adjusted his tie, a nervous tic I remembered from his younger years. Mother, he began hesitantly, I'd like to apologize. For all these years. For the way I've treated you. So have I, Lovegood added, stepping closer. We've been inconsiderate. I looked at them both with warmth. You are my children, I said gently. And I will always love you, no matter how you've treated me. But it's wrong, Mom, Michelle insisted. We should have been better. We all make mistakes, I said quietly. What matters is that we learn from them. We want to make things right, Lovegood continued. To start over. To be a real family again. I smiled, but something inside me remained cautious. Could we really undo years of distance and dismissal? Could we build something new on ground that had been so badly neglected? I didn't know. Let's just move forward, I said softly. Day by day. No big promises, just be more attentive to each other. They nodded, and in their eyes I saw something sincere. They understood now that this wouldn't be solved by one meal, or even one heartfelt apology. Trust, respect, they would need to be rebuilt from scratch. Serenity returned with coffee and dessert, a store-bought tiramisu she made a half-hearted attempt to pass off as homemade. I said nothing about the label still stuck to the bottom of the container. Her effort, however clumsy, was genuine, and I appreciated that. As she poured the coffee, she turned to me. I was wondering if you might give me some investment advice. I have a little savings, and I want to do something smart with it. I blinked in surprise. Serenity had never asked my opinion on anything before. Of course, I replied warmly. I'd love to. And also, she hesitated, I'd like to invite you to the next meeting of our charity committee. Your experience in business could be really useful. Thank you, Serenity, I said with a smile. I'll think about it. It was an awkward olive branch, but one extended in earnest. That mattered. The children came bounding back into the room, loud and laughing. Grandma, Grandma! Amanda ran up to me, eyes wide. Can you teach me how to run a business? I want to be a businesswoman, just like you. If you want to, I said, patting her head affectionately. But it takes a lot of work and study. I'm not afraid of work, she said proudly. Daddy says I'm stubborn, just like you. Lovegood coughed, clearly embarrassed, but I only laughed. Your dad's right. Stubbornness can be a very useful quality, if you learn to channel it. I want to work in a restaurant, Oliver chimed in. Can I help out during summer vacation? You're too young to work, Lovegood objected gently. But maybe you could spend a day or two there. See how things work. If Grandma doesn't mind. I'm all for it, I replied. You're welcome at the Aurora anytime. Maybe Raymond can teach you a few cooking tricks. Raymond? Jason asked, intrigued. Our chef, I explained. He's French, a little hot-tempered, but brilliant. Cool, Jason grinned. Can I come too, Mom? If Grandma invites you, of course, Serenity said, glancing at me with something like gratitude in her eyes. As I looked around the room, at these once distant children now so eager to connect, I felt something shift. My grandchildren no longer saw just a grandmother. They saw a woman with a story, with depth, with something to share. It filled me with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. When it was time to leave, the entire family came outside to see me off. My driver, Thomas, stood waiting by the car. Wow, you have a personal driver? Oliver asked, clearly impressed. Yes, I smiled. His name is Thomas. He's been with me for 8 years. Can I go for a ride with you sometime? Amanda asked, her big eyes full of hope. Of course, sweetheart. Next time, I'll pick you up and we'll go out. Maybe to the park or a nice restaurant. Wherever you'd like. Her face lit up as she threw her arms around me. The other children followed, each offering hugs, even Emily, who usually kept her distance. Michelle walked me to the car. Thanks for coming, Mom, he said softly. It meant a lot to us. It meant a lot to me too, I said, squeezing his hand. We'll try harder, he promised. To be better. To really see you, for who you are. I know, I said. And I'll try too. To be more open. To not hide who I am. He helped me into the car, and I waved at them all as Thomas pulled away. As we drove through the quiet streets, I reflected on the day. It hadn't been perfect. There had been awkwardness, strained smiles, lingering shadows of old wounds. But it was a beginning. A first step toward something new, something more honest and whole. I wasn't naive. Serenity would likely never be a truly close friend. Michel would always wrestle with his pride, and loving good might fall silent again when life grew difficult. But I had seen hope, in my grandchildren's eager questions, in Serenity's clumsy attempts to bridge the gap, in the sincerity of my son's apologies. We would never be the picture-perfect family from greeting cards or television ads. But we could be real. We could try. We could begin again, one careful moment at a time. As we pulled up to my building, I looked out over the glowing cityscape. Millville sparkled beneath the dusk, vibrant and full of life. This was my city, my life, imperfect, complicated, and entirely mine. There was still work to be done, still conversations to have, still bridges to build. But I was ready. After 78 years, I had learned that nothing meaningful comes easily. But with love, patience, and persistence, even the most fractured bonds can begin to mend. The next day, I called Dorian. "How was lunch?" he asked, his tone light but curious. "Not bad," I replied. "Better than I expected." "Did they repent and apologize on their knees?" he teased. "Not quite," I chuckled. "But there's been progress. Especially with the grandchildren." "And Serenity? Does she still see you as a threat to her picture-perfect world?" "She's trying," I answered thoughtfully. "In her own way. It's hard for her to let go of that image of me as a frail, irrelevant old woman. But I think she's starting to see the truth. She preferred you poor and pitted." "Maybe," I agreed. "But people can change. Sometimes all it takes is a push." "And you gave them that push," he said. "I just wanted them to see me," I said quietly. "The real me." "And did they?" he asked gently. "I think they started to," I said, breathing out a soft sigh. "It's a process. A long one." "Well, you have time," Dorian replied. "And patience. And most importantly, love." "Yes," I said with a smile. "Exactly." After the call, I stepped onto the terrace. The spring sun was warm against my face, the breeze playful in my hair. Life, with all its complexity, continued. And my family, flawed, fractured, but still mine, was a part of that life. A new beginning lay ahead. There would be more conversations, more awkward pauses, more trials and errors. But there would also be understanding, forgiveness, and love. And I was ready for all of it.